So we are ready now. And so we're going to get started today with our conversation with Audrey and Shamika. My name is Natasha, and I'm a registered nurse, nurse entrepreneur, and owner of iCareRN, which is a care management company. I provide high quality care management services to individuals living with chronic health conditions by partnering with their physicians or nurse practitioners to deliver care management services outside of the regular medical office visit. As a nurse care manager, I help patients and their families plan for their healthcare needs and ensure that they have access to the resources that are available to them. I advocate for patients and work to ensure that they are meeting their health goals by engaging them in conversations about their condition and educating them about how to manage their disease and empowering them with the information that they need to maintain good health. Today, I will be joined by Shamika Mitchell and Audrey Boyce. We will be talking about nurse burnout primarily and how CCM can be used as an option if you're looking to maybe move from the bedside and maybe create an additional stream of income. So we're going to be talking about what is nurse burnout? Is it overrated? What is the cost of burnout on an individual's health? And what are some ways we can prevent burnout in nursing? Also, we'll talk a bit about how CCM is a great low-cost startup option for nurses looking to leave the bedside and monetize their years of nursing knowledge and skill to have an impact on the lives of individuals who are living with chronic conditions. So I'm going to introduce one of my co-hosts, and that is Shamika. Shamika, can you tell me just a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yes, I'm Shamika Carter Mitchell in transition, and I am a adult and geriatric nurse practitioner certified in the year 2018. I've been providing acute and chronic care management for over 26 years. I started out as an LVN from 1996 to 2006. I became a registered nurse. And then in 2018, I became a nurse practitioner. I worked as a nurse practitioner for the last 18, 19, 20. And in 21, I started my own practice, True Care Telehealth and House Calls. We consider ourselves a specialty practice. We provide chronic care management, remote patient monitoring, transitional care management, and behavioral health integration to patients. We also offer IV vitamin infusions and IM vitamin shots, just as a side cash-based practice for health and well-being. And that's a little bit about me and my background.
Okay, so can you tell me what you think is nurse burnout? What does that mean to you?
Nurse burnout, just in a small definition, is extreme exhaustion. It brings about anxiety. The definition actually is a widespread phenomenon characterized by a reduction in the nurse's energy, and it manifests itself through emotional exhaustion, lack of motivation, feelings of frustration, feelings of anxiety. It could turn into depression sometimes, although those are not in this definition, but it happens. And it leads to a reduction in work efficiency.
Right, yeah. So have you experienced any burnout as a nurse when you were working as a nurse? Do you feel like you experienced any type of burnout while you were working as a nurse?
You know, I worked as an LVN for 10 years, and I'm sure I experienced nurse burnout during that time. I just didn't know how to identify it. But in 2006, I became an RN. I told myself that as a registered nurse, I was going to buy a house. I was going to have a house. Mm-hmm. So from 2006, December 2006 until October 26th, 2008, I worked doubles, 12 hours. But in 2008, October 26th, I went into labor. I worked like a dog all the way through my pregnancy, just through that time, because I was dead set on buying a house, purchasing a house. Well, I went and had my baby in instead of taking when it was time to go back after the typical 6-week period, I was just so exhausted. I was depressed. I thought it was postpartum depression. I was exhausted. I was depressed. All these things that's in this definition, I experienced it. And me and my husband decided that I would just stay home for 6 months and reevaluate, see how it goes in. Well, I stayed home for 6 months. And when I went back to work, I went as a director of nursing, but I was so refreshed and so ready to get back out there and make a difference. Yeah. So I experienced nurse burnout at that time. And as a result of that, I've made a habit that every year, irregardless of what's going on, I got to take a minimum of a month off to just refresh.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I know I worked as an LVN in long-term care as well. And so, you're working and you're actually burnt out as you're working, because I remember days where, I had like maybe 15, 20 dressing changes and no help and short staff and all those things that we constantly deal with. So it's kind of like side by side, we're working, we're doing what we love, but we're really burnt out while doing it. And so that is one of the reasons I wanted to start my own business, because I felt like I was working so hard and the patients were not getting what I felt they needed to get. And so definitely burnt out for me as well. So we have Audrey joining us today, and she talks a lot and teaches a lot about burnout. So Audrey, tell us a bit about yourself and your background.
Thank you, Natasha, for having me on this program and to share my experience with burnout. And so I want to go back when I got into nursing, because I think every nurse gets into nursing with a purpose. For me, it was at the age of 8 years old when I helped a blind man cross a very busy intersection. And I felt so happy that I had made a difference that it was at that time I decided I wanted to be a nurse. So I went to nursing school, I became a nurse. I also got married and had a family. And though those were my joy, I allowed a lot of things to get in the way. Shortly after getting married, my husband and I went into real estate and we purchased rental property. We started with one, and within 2 years, we had purchased 14 properties. Then my husband had another bright idea for a car care business. And immediately we purchased a car care business. And I managed both of these businesses because I was good at it. As you know, we as nurses, we are very organized. So while running these two businesses and raising a family, I continued to pursue my dream of being a nurse by working nights and weekends. And I did that for years. Look, I'm from the Caribbean culture and we're used to having 2 and 3 jobs. So I thought nothing of it, but it started to wear me out. I was tired. I was frustrated. My blood pressure was elevated. One Friday night, I remember on my way to work, I was so exhausted, I wanted to turn around, but I kept on going. That night at work, while I took great care of my patients and did everything I needed to do, I realized I'd lost my joy. My joy for nursing was gone. I was burnt out. And so the journey from burnout would continue for even another couple of months until I had to do certain things to get me from where I was in that burnt out state to the space that I call the breakthrough. And now I call it the abundance as you continue your nursing and you continue to move into other seasons or other chapters in your life. You're on mute, Natasha.
Okay.
Okay, so tell us a bit more, Audrey, about why you believe that this is an important topic for nurses to discuss and really kind of hone in on as we think about our careers and just what we have going on as nurses, with all we have going on right now in the nursing and healthcare industry.
Absolutely. So as you could see, my burnout happened actually 15 years ago. So the story that I just shared with you, it was not recent. It was 15 years ago. So burnout was always a phenomenon, and it's never overrated. What COVID has done is to really 10x it and to really showcase all the imperfections and the cracks in the health industry. So one of the things that I know for sure is that being in a burnout state, you need help. It's like being in any chronic condition state. If you have a diabetes, just ignoring it, it doesn't go away. If you have high blood pressure, just ignoring it, it doesn't go away. What happens, it gets worse. And so for me, when I stepped away because I was totally burned out, I had to then take care of myself. I had to make self-care a priority. And to compound it, there was a lot of other things that happened. But what was the amazing thing is that once I stepped back and I started to care for myself, I reconnected with my faith. I started to focus on what I wanted and what was my purpose. I regained that energy, that vitality. I worked with a coach, and it's through working with a coach, I got that clarity, I got that confidence, and I got that courage to go into the next chapter where I left the bedside and I became a care manager. Started a health ministry in my place of worship. Then I went in the community and I would speak to seniors in senior centers.
Mhm.
And next thing I was going to senior living, speaking to the seniors about healthy eating for healthy aging,
Mhm.
how to take your medicine correctly.
Exactly.
All those things were a new chapter in my nursing career that I embraced, but it came out from being burnout,
Mhm.
going through the breakthrough, and then moving to that abundance place.
Right, yes, yes. So some factors that can affect nurse burnout include working in a high stress environment. So if you work in the ED or you work in the ICU, definitely those are high stress environments. And I would say I would add hospice as well, because working in hospice, you're dealing with a lot of grief and a lot of emotional trauma. And so that is also, I would consider it a high stress environment as well. Sometimes having to deal with bullying by your peers, not really being supported in the environment that you're working. Of course, short staffing, having to work long hours. Sometimes, they have mandatory overtime that you have. And then workplace turnover. There's always staff change out when, of course, staff is not happy. You have more patients with a higher acuity. And then you're not sleeping well because maybe you're working the night shift, and then just the stress of really just dealing with patients, not having the things you need sometimes. Those are some of the factors that can cause nurse burnout. And Audrey, I'd like you to address what is the cause of burnout on someone's health?
Oh my. So burnout is like any other chronic conditions. They love company. So when a nurse experiences that burnout, that extreme exhaustion, emotionally, physically,
Mhm.
and that detachment sometimes from her personally. See, I had to reconnect with myself and my focus.
Mhm.
So when you go through that, there's things that are happening in your body. You can experience high blood pressure. I was there. My
Mhm.
blood pressure was elevated. So the stress and not managing it well led to the high blood pressure. Then there's some other factors because as females, I'm going to identify myself here as a female
Mhm.
caring for a household, a family where the caregivers at home, and also having a job at a hospital, working long hours, caring for countless patients, and working sometimes back to back. And for me, it was the night shift.
Right.
So all those things add to the risk factors, I call it, of burnout.
Mhm.
Of course, I believe certain high stress areas like the emergency room, ICU, those areas are more intense in terms of nurses experiencing burnout. But I say nevertheless, throughout the hospital, if you work at a bedside, because oftentimes we don't control the outcome, though we do our very best. And so having that also as a factor could be something as a risk factor for burnout.
Yes, definitely. The added stress, definitely will contribute, to, poor health, as well. So the cost of burnout on an organization, according to an article that I read in the New York Times, bedside nursing has always been a burnout profession, and hospitals have actually built shortages into their business model to keep their staff lean and, of course, labor costs down. Employers end up losing really good workers when they have staff burnout. Then they have that high turnover. You have patients receiving lower quality of care, nurses working long hours, not taking their breaks. And then that increases the risk of medication errors and, of course, infection rates as well, because you're rushing to do certain things. And it increased the risk of suicide and depression among healthcare providers. And I know that I've also read that recently there has definitely been an increase in providers, with suicide. And so definitely burnout is something, that we as healthcare providers should definitely be concerned about. So what can you do to manage nurse burnout? I would say definitely take care of yourself first, exercise, meditate, find a support system, whether it's your family, a therapist, someone that you can talk to, take time off, and make that time for yourself and make that non-negotiable. And you can also consider a new specialty or an alternative nursing career as well. There's so many options in nursing, that you do have a lot of choices that you can make. So what can you add to that, Audrey, for what can nurses do to help manage burnout or to prevent burnout?
That's a good question, Natasha, but I want to step back a little bit to where we talked about the cost of burnout.
Right.
Now, the cost of burnout to nurses themselves is their health, developing chronic conditions. To the hospitals, as you mentioned, they have had it built in. And so there's all this cost to the hospital. But I think the tragedy is the cost to the patients.
Right.
I met a friend just recently. I hadn't seen her in a while. And when I ran into her, she told me her husband was in the hospital. And so I said, "How are you doing?" And she started to tell me how the husband was doing. He had gotten a stroke, he had gotten a vent, he was off the vent, but he was still being weaned to go to rehab. And as she relayed all this story, and she was telling me sometimes they call for the nurse, and the nurse, it takes a long time for the nurse to come. That one time her husband actually went on himself.
Yeah.
He's not incontinent, but he needed help to walk to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And so as I listened to her, my heart was saddened. And then I turned to her and I said, "How are you doing?" And with that, she burst into tears.
Yeah.
I didn't see that coming. She said, "I can't believe the care my husband is getting." She said, "We waited for a nurse for so long.
Yeah.
And I was so upset that I couldn't help him
Yeah.
because, he was a big guy."
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the price that when hospital work short of nurses and nurses are burnout, the patients do suffer.
Yeah.
And so just listening to her story, and she's a caregiver, the impact it's making on them. So
Yeah.
it's not just nurses, it's not just the hospital, but the patients, the one that we are charged to care for,
Yeah.
and their family members too.
Yes, that
So
is
the question,
so true.
yes. So what could nurses do to prevent burnout or to safeguard themselves or to come back from burnout? That's the question. There are things we can do to safeguard ourselves. And one of the things that I do talk about is radical self-care. Radical self-care, where it means that you're making self-care a priority. And what are some of the things of self-care? Now, self-care, yes, your mani and your pedicures, those are part of self-care too, if that works for you.
Right.
A massage is a wonderful thing. But when I talk about self-care, I'm talking at a much higher level.
Mhm.
I'm talking about mindfulness. I'm talking about using mindfulness as a way to deal with the stress of working at a hospital. The hospital is a stressful place. It's not going to change.
Mhm.
It's how you now are going to care for yourself differently,
Mhm.
walking into that place where it's high stress.
Right.
Now we know there are certain things managers and leaders of hospitals could do to alleviate the stress that nurses go through, like we know improving on nurse-patient ratio.
Mhm.
They can definitely do that.
Right.
And but the other things with, you know, managing the patient's outcome, even sometimes after we've done our best, we may still lose a patient.
Right.
And having a time where nurses have a place that they could debrief, where they can go and just share how they're feeling.
Mhm.
You know, I was once a faith community nurse, and I would be at the hospital, and I
Mhm.
was there for patients from the congregation that I was a member of. But I
Right.
was also there for nurses sometimes when nurses would come into the room and they would talk about a particular patient. I was there for them,
Right.
serving and being intentional care of the spirit.
Mhm.
That's what faith community nurses do. So
Right.
mindfulness is a very important part of caring for yourself
Mhm.
and creating that happiness and that peace of mind that comes even in a place of stress.
Mhm.
Having a sense of balance and a sense of resilience, having a sense of hope and a sense of joy.
Mhm.
And one of the things I teach is the peaceful path of work. And that's a 6-week group coaching program that allow nurses to reconnect with themselves
Mhm.
and to really perform those radical self-care
Yeah.
that we discussed.
Mhm.
Mindfulness, gratitude, boundaries, setting boundaries.
Mhm.
I just came off the phone just shortly before joining this call with one of my clients.
Mhm.
Normally, I don't coach on Sundays, but this
Right.
particular client, she is a hospice nurse and she was running back to back. She skipped the last appointment.
Mhm.
And so I allowed her to come on Sunday so I could coach her.
Mhm.
And the thing that she is struggling with is how to care for herself, time management, and setting boundaries.
Yeah.
And she shared with me, she said, if I only knew how to say no,
Mhm.
if I only know how to say no. For
Yes.
some people, they can say no with a period and it won't bother them. But for,
Right.
especially sometimes as nurses, we
Mhm.
are in this caregiving profession.
Yeah.
It's hard for us to set boundaries. So setting boundaries is so, so important.
It is. It is. I've learned that as well. No is a complete sentence, and I also work as a hospice nurse, so I certainly, understand that as well. So, we have talked about nurse burnout and ways to avoid burnout. And one of those things is considering an alternative nursing career or maybe just an alternate specialty. So chronic care management is one way that nurses can start using their years of nursing knowledge and skills to start their own business and create an additional stream of income for themselves without requiring additional schooling or certification, simply monetizing the nursing experience that they already have to help individuals who are living with chronic health conditions. And as nurses, of course, we are uniquely qualified to do this because this is part of what we do as nurses. We coordinate patient care. And so that is one of the things that we do. Shamika has rolling blackouts in California, so she kind of got knocked off. But just talking about nurses wanting to leave the bedside, CCM is an option since chronic care management is performed outside of the face-to-face visit. It's done virtually, and patients have around the clock 24/7 access to care managers and health information, and a continuous relationship with their care team members. And that allows the patient to be better engaged and connected to the practice that they work in. So CCM can be done on the side while you work towards financial independence. And I actually have my own chronic care management business, and I also work full-time as well. So Audrey, you said you have a 6-week coaching class for those nurses that are dealing with burnout. Yes, you have a 6-week coaching class.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, you did freeze for a moment.
Okay.
Yes, so what it is, I have a 6 weeks coaching program. It's a group coaching program. And
Okay.
it's to help nurses who are in that space where you're feeling a little bit tired, you're feeling a little overwhelmed, you're a little bit confused about how you're going to make the profession work because you are tired of feeling tired.
Right.
And you were thinking about quitting. You know, they did a recent survey and they said 93% of nurses are thinking about quitting. That's the classic sign of a nurse that's burnt out. Now,
Right.
oftentimes nurses don't quit nursing, they quit their managers, they quit their leaders, they quit the hospital, and they go on to do great things in nursing or otherwise. And then sometimes nurses just stay where they are, but then they look for the next best thing right within where they are. So I believe that as a nurse, you can remain in that place of work and you can use mindfulness to be more effective with less stress, that it includes a combination of in-depth hands-on activities, the coaching program, and it's going to help you to understand those core concepts of mindfulness and also resilience. You know, resilience is something that is so important when you're in a hospital because, yes, from day to day, you're going to have situations where you're going to feel totally knocked down after you've done everything for that patient and still the outcome was not what you expected.
Right.
So resilience is something that is so important, that how do we start the next day? How do we, after working that 12-hour shift, go home, debrief, and say, it's okay, I'm going to go back to work the next day, full of energy, full of hope, ready to do it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in a way of joy, in a way of peace, in a way of energy. You know, I think one of the things that I do first with nurses, I really guide them to reconnect with that purpose when they decided that they wanted to be a nurse.
Right.
For me, as I said, it was at 8 years old. And for me, I've had to really come to grips, even after my burnout, what my next chapter in my life was going to be.
Right.
And it was then that I worked with a coach and I got the clarity, the confidence, and the courage in how to step forward. And I started a care management business, worked with seniors. But what I'm so passionate about since the COVID pandemic is really supporting my nursing colleagues
Right.
to connect with themselves, to go from burnout to breakthrough to abundance. It's
Yeah.
possible.
Wow, that is amazing, Audrey. So you have an ebook as well. So how can
Yes, I do.
anyone who wants to learn more about burnout kind of reach out to you? Is it okay if they reach out to you on Messenger to learn more about your ebook? Okay, we do have your link, and so that is shared there. So anyone that wants to learn more about burnout and Audrey's program, the link is posted in the comments. And so we are getting ready to close out our meeting for today, our conversation for today. So any closing thoughts for today, Audrey?
Yes, thank you, Natasha, so much for bringing awareness to this phenomenal burnout. Thank you so much for hosting this program. You know, I went through burnout and I didn't realize while I was going through it. I heard Shamika said while she was in it, she did not really identify it. And so it all comes down when one day you're just like, I'm done. You stop thinking about quitting and you actually quit.
Yep.
You actually leave. And then what next? For me, I left and I was home for a moment until I met the coach that worked with me. And she put me through a process, a 6-week process where I gained that clarity, that confidence, and the courage of what I wanted the next chapter in my life to look like.
Right.
And that is when I went in and I started working with seniors, then into a care management business. And now I support nurses just like myself to help
Right.
them to get to a better place. So one thing I want to share with nurses, the link I've put in the chat, I'm offering you a free ebook. It has my story and it has how you can recognize burnout, how you can safeguard yourself, and some simple exercises and activities to do to prevent it. Also, it's a simple questionnaire that you answer, and then from answering that questionnaire that takes 1 minute, you're going to see if you are probably on the brink of being in burnout or you're in burnout.
Right.
So thank you so much for this forum, and I appreciate you allowing me to share it with you.
Thank you so much, Audrey, for your time today, for joining us as we talked a bit about nurse burnout and a little bit about chronic care management as well. So we do know that as nurses, we've become accustomed to working short-staffed and and being burnt out. I've been a nurse for 20 years, and so burnout for me, was definitely real. And being able to now create something at the side that I feel passionate about, and I feel I can really serve my purpose as a nurse. Definitely chronic care management has been that for me. So if you'd like to learn more about our course, of course, we do have that reopening back in November, and please, you can reach out to me on Messenger if you'd like to learn more. And again, with Audrey, she has her ebook. And if you're looking to get some help with some nurse burnout, definitely reach out to Audrey. So thank you guys, everyone, for joining us today, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natasha.
Okay.